A 50-Year Journey Come Full Circle, written by Dr. Matthew A. Johnson. I'm Willi Rose, and this is Chapter 4, The Elephant Man. Within weeks of my family's Bigfoot encounter, when my private practice office phone rang, I never knew if I was going to be talking to a client, a potential new client, someone from the media, someone else who had a Bigfoot encounter, or someone who was simply interested in the Bigfoot phenomena. On one occasion, when I answered the phone at the beginning of my workday, there was an elderly gentleman on the line who spoke very politely and with a British accent. I asked, "Are you calling me all the way from England?" He said, "No, sir. I'm actually calling you from next door. I'm renting an office in the same complex where your office is located. My name is Dr. William York, and I'm a retired wildlife biologist. I now own a mortgage finance company, and I fiddle around with lending out small home loans to local residents. I used to be a big game hunter and a wildlife preserve officer in Africa for just over 40 years. I was wondering if I could buy you lunch sometime this week and talk with you about your family's recent Bigfoot encounter." I immediately responded, "How about this afternoon?" He said, "Well, that is delightfully prompt, and it would be an honor to buy you lunch today. Can we meet next door at the River Rock Cafe at 12 noon? I responded in the affirmative, and we met up for lunch about 3 hours later. I was excited because he sounded like a very fascinating individual with some possible interesting stories of his own to share with me. Also, I enjoyed listening to his British accent. Besides, I never turn down free food. I ordered my usual ham sandwich and small garden salad with extra ranch dressing. Dr. William York, who preferred to be called Bill, ordered a bowl of soup. He stated, "I like to eat light because it helps keep the weight off this old man's body." He was only 67 years old at the time. We sat outside at one of the tables with a huge umbrella to keep us out of the hot rays of the sun. He spent some time introducing himself to me and told me about how he went about fulfilling his boyhood dream of moving to Africa and becoming a big game hunter. Apparently, at the age of 17, Bill left his home and moved to Africa to start hunting elephants for their tusks. After successfully hunting over 250 elephants, he told me that he felt guilty, put his hunting rifle away, and decided to become a game management officer and studied to become a wildlife biologist. Eventually, he informed me he became a primate specialist and loved studying gorillas while helping to keep them safe. Bill shared with me about how he overcame his fear of working with gorillas in Africa. He developed the habit of going out to the areas where the gorillas were foraging, and he would hang out with them. Occasionally, the alpha male would bluff charge him. Bill told me, although I was scared to death, I would raise my rifle and tell myself not to shoot unless the gorilla passed a certain point. Then I felt comfortable to allow him to come closer before I would raise my rifle. After a while, the alpha male would run all the way up to me and veer off to my left while barely brushing my shoulder, but never knocking me over. I started leaving my rifle behind because I realized that he wasn't going to hurt me. All I had to do was treat him and the others with respect, and he would allow me to hang around the area with them. Bill went on to tell me about his game management enforcement stories. Over a few decades, he managed to stop a lot of poachers from being successful and saved a lot of wildlife. Also, apparently his reputation led to him leading a safari for the Queen of England. Finally, he shared with me that he was a consultant to help design and open up the animal kingdom at Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida, as well as the wildlife safari in Winston, Oregon. I've actually been to both parks, and I was very impressed with both of them. Fortunately, both Bill and I had enough time during our business day to block out 2 hours for our lunch appointment because he took up the first hour with his very interesting stories. It also gave me time to finish my lunch and made me feel more comfortable to open up to him and tell him everything during the second hour. Bill asked me to tell him all about my family's Bigfoot encounter. I shared everything about the encounter with him, including the fear and the tears that naturally accompanied my story when I would tell it almost 2 decades ago. Between the details, my shaking body, and my tears, Bill stated, "That's a very fascinating story, and I believe you 100%. Those words provided me with comfort and encouragement. It was nice to be believed. Then Bill said something that scared me to death. He said, "We need to get up there as soon as possible." To be honest, I was starting to get a little frustrated with people continually asking me to take them back to the scene of the encounter. Their request involved taking the time to do so, required a lengthy and strenuous hike back up the mountainside again and again, and kept forcing me to face my fears. I had a life to live. I had a family, my children's activities, and a private practice to manage. I couldn't drop everything all of the time just because someone wanted me to take them to the scene of my family's Bigfoot encounter. I responded to Bill, "You mean take you up to the scene of my family's encounter?" He said, "No. I mean we need to get up there as soon as possible to conduct an expedition. I would think that 2 nights should do." He could see my automatic uneasiness in my body language. I said, "An expedition? 2 nights? You want to go up there and spend 2 nights with what I saw up there? No offense, Bill, but you got to be kidding me. That thing was huge, massive." Bill responded by saying, "Matt, may I call you Matt?" I nodded in the affirmative. He said, "Matt, you know that animals avoid large groups of people. You lived in Alaska and are familiar with this truth. We are not going up the mountain to find Bigfoot. If they're like any other animal that I've ever dealt with in Africa, they will be avoiding us. Instead, we are simply going up there to find evidence that they're in the area. If they're up there, we will find evidence. Can you get a group of men together for the expedition?" I said, "I've only lived in Grants Pass for 8 months so far. However, recently several outdoorsmen and hunters have contacted me. There's a local pastor and principal of a Christian school who's also expressed an interest in going up to the mountain. His name is Doug Thomas. I'm sure he would help muster up several men to go up on the mountain with us for a Bigfoot expedition. When would you like to go up there?" Bill responded, "How about this coming weekend?" I said, "I'm not sure if we can find enough guys on such short notice, but I can sure give it a try. If not this coming weekend, I'm sure we could get enough men together by the following weekend." Bill said, "Well then, why don't you start making some phone calls and get back to me as soon as possible? I'll be free on either weekend." I promised Bill that I would put together a group of men for a Bigfoot expedition within 2 weeks or less. In the meantime, I had a private practice to manage, children to parent, and a public and media frenzy to manage. The phone calls and emails were constantly coming in and were starting to overwhelm me. That's the end of Chapter 4 of Bigfoot, a 50-year journey come full circle, written by Dr. Matthew A. Johnson. Stay tuned for Chapter 5, The Media and Public Feeding Frenzy. I'm Willi Rose.